All right, thanks for coming back. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
Christmas Eve at my parents' house always looked perfect from the outside. The house sits on a quiet street in Northern Virginia, about 20 minutes from the Pentagon. Big colonial-style white columns, a circular driveway, the kind of place that tells the neighborhood you did very well in life. My father bought it after his last promotion in the Army. He still talks about that promotion like it happened last week, even though he retired almost 10 years ago. That night, the dining room looked like something out of a holiday catalog. My mother had polished the long oak table until it reflected the chandelier above it. Red candles, gold napkin rings, a giant roast in the center that had been cooking since noon. Vanessa was sitting on my father's right, exactly where she always sat. She liked the position because it made her look like the second in command of the family. Her husband Julian sat next to her, leaning back in his chair, like he owned the room. I was at the far end of the table. Nobody said I had to sit there. It just kind of happened over the years. Julian had already finished his second glass of wine when the bragging started. So the contract finally closed last week, he said, tapping the side of his glass with his fork like he was giving a speech. 400 million. Not bad for something everyone said was impossible. My father leaned forward immediately. His eyes always light up when someone says the words defense contract. 400, he said. That's serious money. Julian smiled the way people smile when they want admiration more than conversation. It's a multi-phase deal, he said. Advanced targeting systems, overseas applications. The Pentagon wants everything delivered ahead of schedule. He said the word Pentagon slowly, like he was dropping a medal on the table. Vanessa put her hand on his arm. I keep telling him he needs to stop working so hard, she said, smiling at my parents. But you know, Julian, always chasing the next big thing. My mother laughed politely. I kept eating my potatoes. Then Julian added the second part of the story. Oh, and I finally picked up the Porsche yesterday, he said. Casually. The new 911, my father whistled. Red, he asked. Black, Julian said. More professional. Vanessa turned slightly and looked down the table at me. You should see it, Audrey, she said. It costs more than your entire apartment. I took a sip of water and didn't answer. That usually ended the conversation. Silence was something my family interpreted as agreement. But Julian wasn't finished showing off. Actually, he said, wiping his hands with a napkin, I can show you something better than the car. He reached down beside his chair and pulled up a laptop. Not a normal laptop. Even from the other end of the table, I noticed the red border sticker along the edge of the case. Anyone who worked around classified systems recognized it immediately. It meant the machine had been approved for secure material. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Julian opened the screen and pushed it toward my father. You'll like this, he said. The screen lit up with a technical drawing. Complex shapes, component labels, the kind of diagram you only see in defense engineering presentations. My father leaned closer. Is that part of the targeting platform, he asked. Julian nodded. Prototype configuration, he said. Proudly. Then he did something that made the back of my neck tighten. He clicked the Wi-Fi icon. The house network popped up on the screen. Home Richard. Julian selected it and hit connect. The laptop joined the network instantly. I set my fork down. Julian. I said calmly that machine shouldn't be on a home network. The room went quiet for about 2 seconds. Julian looked up like someone had interrupted his favorite TV show. It's fine, he said. It's not fine, I replied. If that system handles controlled material, it shouldn't be connected to an unsecured router. Vanessa let out a small laugh, not a friendly one. Oh my God, she said, shaking her head. She looked around the table like she was inviting everyone into a joke. Here we go. My father frowned slightly. What's the issue, he asked. Julian shrugged. Nothing, he said. Audrey works in compliance or something like that. She gets nervous about paperwork. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. Don't bring that office HR voice to the dinner table, she said. You're not auditing anyone here. I didn't react. I just kept looking at the laptop. Julian had already turned the screen back toward my father, pointing at the diagram like a salesman. This part here, he said, tapping the screen, is where the real innovation is. My phone vibrated in my lap. I ignored it at first. Then it vibrated again. I glanced down. A text message from Vanessa, which was strange because she was sitting less than 3 feet away from me. I opened it. The message was short. You're the embarrassment of this family. Finish eating and leave. I don't have a useless sister anymore. I read it twice. Then I looked up. Vanessa was cutting her steak calmly, like she had just sent a grocery list. No one else at the table had seen the message. My mother was asking Julian about the Porsche again. My father was still staring at the laptop. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger, something colder. I set my phone down next to my plate. Then I slowly placed my fork on the porcelain. I made sure it didn't make a sound. Vanessa noticed. She looked up and met my eyes. There was a small smile on her face, the kind people wear when they think they just won something. I stood up. My chair slid back quietly. My mother looked confused. "Are you leaving already?" she asked. "I have an early morning," I said. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. Vanessa didn't say anything out loud. She didn't need to. The text message had already said everything, but before I turned toward the door, I glanced back at the laptop. The screen was still open, still connected. In the corner of the display, the network details were visible, including the local IP address assigned by my father's router. My eyes stayed there for about 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time when you know exactly what you're looking at. Julian kept talking completely unaware. Vanessa thought she had just removed a problem from her life. She thought she had pushed out the quiet sister who never fought back. What she didn't know was that the moment Julian connected that laptop to a public home network, he handed me the one thing I needed, the hammer that would destroy his entire empire. Before I walked out the front door, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the smartest person in the room, but everyone treated you like the quiet one who didn't matter? Tell me in the comments. The first thing I did the next morning was badge into the SCIF before most of the building lights were even on. The hallway outside was quiet. Government buildings in Washington always feel different before 8 in the morning. No meetings, no noise. Just the sound of HVAC systems and the occasional security door opening somewhere down the corridor. I tapped my badge against the reader. The door unlocked with a dull click. Inside the SCIF, there were no windows, no phones, and no outside signal of any kind. Just gray walls, locked cabinets, and rows of secure terminals. The air always felt colder in there, mostly because the servers never stopped running. A steady hum filled the room. White noise for people who work with secrets. I hung my coat on the back of the chair and logged into my terminal. The system required 2 factors, a smart card and a rotating code that changed every 30 seconds. Most people think government security is dramatic. In reality, it's mostly procedures and paperwork. But those procedures can end careers. I opened the clearance review system and typed in Julian's full name. The file appeared immediately. Security clearance level top secret /SCI. Active contractor. Defense systems integration. Exactly the kind of person who should know better than to connect a classified workstation to a home Wi-Fi network. I leaned back in the chair for a moment. Last night replayed in my head. Julian bragging about the contract. Vanessa laughing at me across the table. The text message sitting on my phone like a signed confession. I pushed the memory aside and opened the official record. Every person with a clearance has one main document that matters more than anything else. The SF-86. It's the form where you tell the government everything about your life. Foreign travel, financial accounts, business interests, family connections. The rule is simple. If you lie on that form, your clearance disappears. If the lie involves money or foreign entities, the consequences get much worse. Julian's SF-86 was long, 40 pages. Most of it looked normal at first glance. Employment history, education, residential addresses. Then I opened the foreign travel section. The file showed 2 trips in the last 3 years, London, Toronto. Both short visits, both reported properly. But when I cross-checked the travel database used by contractor oversight, something didn't match. I opened a second system and entered his passport number. 4 additional trips appeared. Dubai, 3 times, all listed as private travel. None of them reported on his SF-86 update. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. That alone was a serious problem. Anyone with a clearance knows foreign travel has to be reported before and after the trip, especially travel to locations with active intelligence interest. Dubai shows up in counterintelligence briefings all the time. I opened the timeline. Trip 1 9 months ago, Trip 2 6 months ago, Trip 3 2 months ago. Each visit lasted less than 48 hours. Short enough to avoid attention if nobody looked closely, but someone had looked closely. Me. I pulled the financial disclosure section next. This was where things usually got interesting. The system loaded Julian's reported accounts: checking, savings, investment portfolio. Everything looked stable. High income, no large debts. The kind of profile clearance investigators love. Then I ran the cross-reference against international transfer reports. The screen filled with new data: wire transfers, large ones, 200,000, 300,000, 420,000. Each transfer originated from accounts linked to a holding company registered in the United Arab Emirates. Destination: a small consulting firm registered in Virginia. I opened the corporate registration file. The owner's name appeared instantly: Vanessa Carter, my sister. I sat still for a moment. The server fans continued their low, mechanical hum. I opened the company profile. It had no employees, no real office, just a mailbox address and a registered tax ID classic shell structure. Money coming in from overseas. Money leaving through domestic purchases. Luxury retail payments. Jewelry, designer stores, high-end boutiques in Georgetown. I clicked one of the entries. Payment description: Hermes, Washington, D.C. Amount $27,800. I thought about the purse Vanessa carried into dinner last night. Then I leaned forward and opened one more file. Julian's contractor project access list. There it was. The targeting platform program he had been bragging about at dinner. Total program value $400 million. The same number he had proudly announced between bites of steak. I opened the technical classification summary. Restricted export data. Controlled engineering specifications. Exactly the kind of material foreign contractors would pay enormous amounts to see early. I pulled up the timeline again. Every Dubai trip happened within 2 weeks of a design milestone for that program. My stomach tightened. This wasn't arrogance. It wasn't bragging. Julian wasn't successful because he was brilliant. He was successful because he was selling information before the program even finished development. I leaned back slowly in my chair. The picture was suddenly very clear. The foreign money, the shell company, Vanessa moving funds through personal purchases, money laundering disguised as luxury shopping. And then something from last night made perfect sense. The text message: "You're the embarrassment of this family. Finish eating and leave." At the time it sounded like cruelty, now it sounded like strategy. They didn't want me at that table. Not someone who worked inside the clearance system. Not someone who understood exactly how contractor security reviews worked. Vanessa didn't just want to insult me, she wanted distance. If I wasn't around the family anymore, I wouldn't notice anything strange. I wouldn't ask questions. I wouldn't connect the dots between my sister's sudden luxury lifestyle and her husband's defense contracts. I stared at Julian's file again. Then I opened the clearance action panel. Several options appeared on the screen: review, flag, monitor, and one that contractors fear more than anything else: suspend. Suspension doesn't mean guilt. It means access stops immediately while investigators look deeper. No badge, no classified systems, no meetings, nothing. For someone working on a $400 million defense contract, it's like cutting the oxygen line during a spacewalk. I hovered the cursor over the option. Not yet. First, I saved every file connected to the case: foreign travel logs, transfer records, corporate ownership documents. By the time I finished, the evidence folder had more than 20 files. I sat back again. Last night, Vanessa believed she had pushed her useless sister out of the family. She thought she had cleaned up a problem. What she actually did was remove the only reason I might have hesitated to look at her husband's record. Now I was looking, and what I saw was not a successful contractor. It was a security breach with a luxury wardrobe. The humiliation at the dinner table suddenly felt very small compared to the damage sitting in front of me on that screen. I was still staring at Julian's financial transfers when my secure desk phone started ringing. The SCIF phones never ring for casual conversation. Anyone calling that line already knows where you are and what you're doing. I picked it up. "This is Audrey." My father's voice came through immediately. Audrey, no Merry Christmas, no small talk. Just my name the same way he used to say it when I was 16 and about to get a lecture about responsibility. "I tried calling you last night," he said. "I left early," I replied. "Yes, I noticed." There was a pause. Then his voice shifted into the tone he used when he was giving orders during his army years. "I need you to come by the house this afternoon," he said. We have something important to discuss. I already knew what that meant. When you say discuss, I said calmly, you usually mean you've already decided something. He ignored that. This concerns the family property, he said. Now I was interested. What property? Your grandmother's house. That caught my attention. The house he was referring to wasn't the big colonial where my parents lived. It was the smaller brick home in Arlington, where my grandmother had lived until she passed away 3 years earlier. She left it equally to both of her granddaughters, Vanessa and me. The house had sentimental value to me. My grandmother used to bake pies there every Sunday afternoon. The place smelled like cinnamon and coffee for most of my childhood. Vanessa never cared about it. Until recently. What about it? I asked. My father cleared his throat. We've decided it's time to sell the property, he said. We? I asked. Your mother and I. That's interesting, I said. Because the house belongs to Vanessa and me. He didn't like that answer. You're missing the point, he said. Julian is expanding his company. There's an opportunity here that could benefit the whole family. I leaned back in my chair. The server room hummed quietly around me. And the house helps how I asked. We need to free up some capital, he said. Of course. Money, it always came back to money. My father continued speaking. Vanessa is already willing to sign her portion over to the business, he said. All we need is your signature so the property can be used as collateral. Collateral? I opened another window on my computer and typed in the address of my parents' house. Property records appeared in seconds. Mortgage refinance, 6 months ago, large loan amount. I kept my voice neutral. You want me to give up my share of the house so Julian can borrow against it? Yes, my father said. That's a terrible idea. His tone sharpened immediately. Julian is building something important, he said. $400 million contracts don't come along every day. I looked at the financial transfers still open on my screen. Dubai. Wire transfers. Shell companies. You're assuming that contract is stable, I said. It is stable, he snapped. Julian is a serious businessman. My father always admired men who talked about big deals. He continued before I could respond. Frankly, Audrey, this shouldn't even be a debate, he said. You've never shown much interest in business anyway. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked a different question. How much money did you invest already? Silence. That was answer enough. I opened the property records again. Another document appeared. Home equity loan against my parents' house. Large enough to make most financial advisors uncomfortable. You already mortgaged your own house, I said. More silence. Then my father said something that confirmed everything. We believe in Julian, he said. We. That word again. They weren't just helping. They were partners. My parents had put their retirement home on the line to invest in Vanessa's company. The same shell company receiving foreign wire transfers. The same one buying luxury handbags and pretending to be a consulting firm. I rubbed my forehead slowly. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was a family-wide financial disaster waiting to explode. You want my signature so the bank can extend more credit, I said. Yes. And if I refuse, my father didn't hesitate. Then you're being selfish, he said. There it was, the word every scapegoat in a family eventually hears. You don't understand how big this opportunity is, he continued. Your sister is finally part of something major, and instead of supporting her, you're standing in the way. I looked at Julian's clearance file again. The evidence folder sat on the screen like a quiet bomb. I'm not standing in the way, I said. I'm preventing a mistake. You're preventing progress, he replied. You always do this, always questioning, always criticizing. His voice grew louder. Your sister married a man who's building real success. The least you could do is help. I let him finish. Then I asked one last question. Did Vanessa tell you where the investment money comes from? Yes, he said immediately. Contracts. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. Contracts. That was technically true, just not in the way he thought. My father kept talking. You work for the government, he said. You should understand how these industries operate. Big risks, big returns. I stared at the suspend option on Julian's clearance screen. My father continued. Frankly, Audrey, sometimes I think you resent your sister's success. That was the moment I understood something very clearly. My parents were already on the ship. They weren't passengers, they were investors, and the ship was sinking, slowly, quietly, with $400 million worth of classified data leaking through the hull. I spoke calmly into the phone. Dad, yes. An Army colonel should know the first rule of investment. What rule is that? I kept my voice flat. Never hand ammunition to a traitor. There was a long silence. Then his voice exploded. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I ended the call before he could finish. The room returned to its steady mechanical hum. I looked back at Julian's file. The cursor was still hovering over the same option. Suspend clearance. One click. That was all it would take to stop him from walking into the Pentagon tomorrow like nothing was wrong. No more access. No more classified systems. No more pretending he was a trusted contractor. I thought about Vanessa's text message again. You're the embarrassment of this family. I moved the mouse, clicked the button. The system asked for confirmation. Security clearance status change. Reason pending counterintelligence review. I entered my authorization code. Then I pressed confirm. Julian's clearance status changed instantly. Active to suspended. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the first alert appeared on my screen. It was early Monday morning, the first workday after the holiday weekend. The building was slowly coming back to life. Doors opening, conversations in the hallway, people catching up after Christmas. Inside the SCIF, nothing changed. Same gray walls, same low hum of servers, same terminals glowing quietly in the dim light. My clearance review dashboard refreshed automatically every few minutes. Most of the notifications were routine. Travel reports, contractor updates, minor compliance checks. Then Julian's name appeared. Access attempt logged. Location Pentagon South Parking Gate. Timestamp 0742. I leaned slightly closer to the screen. This was exactly what I expected. Contractors like Julian had one predictable habit. When something went wrong with their clearance, they always assumed it was a temporary glitch, a database error, a technical problem someone would fix in 5 minutes. They never imagined the system was working exactly as designed. Another notification appeared. Credential presented CAC card. Verification in progress. I could picture the scene without even seeing it. Julian arriving in the black Porsche he had bragged about 2 nights earlier, parking in the contractor lot like he owned the place. Armani suit, expensive watch, walking toward the entrance like he was about to close another deal. He had done that routine dozens of times. Badge, green light, door opens. This morning would be different. The system updated again. Credential denied. Security response initiated. I watched the next line appear. Clearance status revoked. Instruction detain immediately. The log paused for several seconds. Then the audio channel opened from the gate security system. I turned up the volume slightly. A voice came through. Sir, your credential is not valid. Julian. What do you mean not valid? You'll need to step aside, sir. That's impossible, Julian snapped. Scan it again. A short beep echoed through the system. Another denial. Julian's voice got louder. Do you have any idea who I am? The guard stayed calm. Yes, sir, we do. That's why we need you to remain here. More footsteps could be heard on the recording. Additional security approaching. Julian didn't like that. This is ridiculous, he said. My clearance is top secret. I'm here for a program review meeting. Your clearance status changed this morning, the guard replied. That's not possible. I watched the live text log update in real time. Subject refusing instructions. Security escalation. Julian's voice became sharper. You're making a mistake, he said. Call your supervisor. We already have. Another pause. Then Julian said something that made me smile slightly. This is probably some system error, he said. Someone in HR must have flagged my account. HR. That was the word Vanessa used at dinner. My useless government paperwork job. Julian continued arguing with the guards. I've got a $400 million contract tied to this building, he said. You can't just block me at the door. One of the guards responded calmly. Sir, please place your hands where we can see them. Julian laughed in disbelief. You're kidding. We're not. Another pause. The audio picked up the sound of a phone being pulled out. Julian was calling someone. I already knew who. The call connected after 2 rings. Vanessa answered. Julian. Something's wrong, he said quickly. My badge isn't working. What they're saying, my clearance got revoked. That's impossible, she said immediately. That's what I told them, Julian snapped. The guard's voice cut in quietly in the background. Sir, please stay where you are. Julian ignored him. This is insane, he said into the phone. They're treating me like a criminal. Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. Did you talk to Audrey last night? There it was, Julian hesitated. What does she have to do with anything? She works in compliance, Vanessa said. She's the only person in the family who deals with this kind of stuff. That doesn't mean she can shut down my clearance, Julian replied. Maybe she complained about something. Like what? Vanessa didn't hesitate. You connecting that laptop at dinner? Julian scoffed. That's nothing. Well, maybe she ran to HR with it, Vanessa said. You know how she is. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Interesting. Vanessa believed this was a personal grudge, a petty complaint, a sister tattling to human resources. Julian lowered his voice. Even if she did, he said, this kind of thing doesn't happen overnight. Vanessa sounded angry now. She's always been jealous, she said. Always trying to act smarter than everyone. The guard interrupted again. Sir, we need you to step away from the door, Julian snapped. Give me a minute. He went back to the call. This will get fixed, he said to Vanessa. Probably just a temporary hold. Still, she said we should deal with Audrey. How we go talk to her? Julian laughed. Oh, I'm definitely talking to her. Vanessa's tone hardened. She embarrassed you in front of my parents, she said. Now she's messing with your career. I'll handle it, Julian replied. No, Vanessa said. We handle it together. There was a short silence. Then Julian said the words I had been waiting to hear. Fine. We'll go see her tonight. The call ended. The gate audio continued for a few more seconds. Metal footsteps. More voices. Julian still arguing. Then the system cut the feed. I looked at the clock. 8:03 a.m., right on schedule. But Julian was wrong about something. This wasn't a temporary hold. And it definitely wasn't an HR complaint. At 4 o'clock that morning, while most of Washington was still asleep, I had already sent another request through the Treasury Coordination Channel, Financial Review Authority, contractor corruption flag, the kind that automatically triggers banking restrictions, which meant that while Julian was yelling at Pentagon security guards about a broken badge, something else was quietly happening. Across several international banking networks, accounts freezing, transfers stopping, cards declining. Julian believed today's problem was a small system error caused by a resentful sister. What he didn't realize was that losing access to the Pentagon was only the first thing I had taken away from him. I was pouring hot water into a teacup when the first knock hit my door. Not a polite knock, a hard one. The kind people use when they already decided they're angry before the conversation even begins. My apartment is on the 4th floor of a quiet building in Arlington. Nothing fancy, no marble lobby, no valet parking, just a clean, well-maintained building full of people who prefer privacy over attention. Vanessa always hated it. She once described it as the kind of place interns live. I set the kettle down and checked the clock. 6:17 p.m., right on time. The knocking came again, louder. Then Julian's voice came through the door. Audrey, opened the door. I didn't rush. I carried my teacup to the small dining table and sat down. The folder I prepared earlier was already there. Printed documents, financial transfers, corporate records, and one photograph. The knocking turned into pounding. Vanessa joined in. We know you're home, she shouted. Open the door right now. I took a slow sip of tea. Chamomile, very calming. Another loud bang rattled the door frame. Audrey, Julian yelled. I stood up, walked over, and unlocked the door. The moment it opened, Julian pushed his way inside like a storm. Vanessa followed right behind him. Neither of them waited to be invited. Julian was still wearing the same Armani suit from the morning. The jacket was wrinkled now. His tie was loosened like he had spent the entire day fighting fires. Vanessa looked the same as always. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, and the Hermes bag hanging from her arm like a trophy. Julian turned toward me immediately. What the hell did you do? He demanded. I closed the door calmly. Good evening to you too, I said. Don't play games, he snapped. My clearance got revoked this morning, I heard. Vanessa stepped closer. You went to HR, she said accusingly. HR again. Interesting how confident she sounded. You told them about the laptop, she continued. Julian pointed a finger at me. You think this is funny, he said. You know what kind of damage this could cause? I walked back to the table and sat down again. The tea was still warm. You should sit, I said. Neither of them moved. Vanessa folded her arms. You're going to call whoever you complained to, she said, right now, and say what I asked, that it was a misunderstanding. Julian nodded sharply. Exactly. And if I don't, Julian leaned closer, then you're going to have a much bigger problem than a family argument. I raised an eyebrow. Is that a threat? It's reality, he said. Your father still has connections. I can make a few calls, and suddenly your government job becomes a lot less stable." Vanessa smiled slightly. "You work in paperwork," she said. "Don't forget that." I took another sip of tea. "You're both very confident for people who showed up uninvited." Julian's patience was gone. "Stop stalling," he snapped. "Fix this." Instead of answering, I opened the folder on the table. Vanessa noticed it immediately. "What's that information?" I said. Julian scoffed. "This isn't a courtroom." "No," I agreed. "It's my dining table." I slid the first document across the surface. A printed screenshot. The photograph I took Christmas night. Julian's laptop screen. Connected to my father's home Wi-Fi. Network details visible in the corner. Julian stared at it. Vanessa leaned over his shoulder. "So what?" she said. Julian recovered quickly. "That proves nothing." "You're right," I said calmly. "By itself, it doesn't." I turned another page in the folder. Several printed bank records, wire transfers, dates, amounts, origin accounts located in Dubai, destination Carter Strategic Consulting, Vanessa's company. Julian's expression tightened. Vanessa frowned. "What is this?" I tapped the paper lightly. "Financial records." Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "My company has clients." "Yes," I said. "International ones." Julian stepped forward again. "You're digging into things that aren't your business." I looked at him. "Actually, it is my business." Vanessa crossed her arms again. "You're jealous," she said. "That's what this is." I almost laughed. Instead, I reached for the final page. A summary sheet printed from the Treasury monitoring system. Frozen accounts list. Several numbers highlighted in red. Vanessa's name appeared multiple times. I slid the page across the table. Vanessa glanced down. Her expression didn't change at first. Then her eyes stopped moving. Julian looked over her shoulder. "What is that?" he asked. I leaned back slightly. "You called me useless the other night," I said. Vanessa didn't respond. She was still staring at the page, so I figured I should check something. I continued. Julian picked up the document. His voice was quieter now. "What is this supposed to mean?" "It means the accounts connected to Vanessa's company were flagged this morning." For what, I answered calmly. "Money laundering." Vanessa's head snapped up. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Julian looked back down at the page. Then he looked at the Hermes bag hanging from Vanessa's arm. "Wait," he said slowly. Vanessa clutched the bag instinctively, like someone protecting a life raft. I spoke quietly. "You said I was useless." Neither of them interrupted now. "But the account you used to buy that Hermes bag you're holding," I continued. I glanced at my watch. It was frozen 15 minutes ago by the Treasury Department. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the bag strap. Her face lost color so quickly, it looked like someone had turned off a light. Julian stared at me. For the first time since he burst through the door, he wasn't shouting. He was thinking. And the realization was beginning to reach him. This wasn't HR. This wasn't a petty complaint. This was something much bigger. Vanessa's voice came out as a whisper. "You can't do that." I met her eyes. I didn't. The room fell silent except for the faint sound of traffic outside the window. Vanessa held the bag against her chest like it was the last thing keeping her from drowning. Vanessa was still staring at the paper when Julian finally spoke. His voice had changed. The confidence was gone. "What exactly did you report?" he asked. I set my teacup down. "I didn't report anything," I said. Julian looked at me like he was trying to decide if I was lying. "You're telling me Treasury just randomly froze my wife's accounts on the same day my clearance disappears? I'm telling you financial monitoring systems don't care about family drama." Vanessa finally looked up from the table. Her voice was shaking now. "This is insane," she said. "This is some kind of mistake." Julian didn't answer her. He was still staring at the documents. He picked up one of the transfer records and read the numbers again. 200,000, 300,000, 400,000. His jaw tightened. "You pulled my financial reports," he said quietly. "Yes, you had no right. I had authorization." Vanessa turned toward him. "What is she talking about?" Julian didn't answer immediately. His eyes moved across the room slowly. He was doing the math now. Clearance suspension, financial monitoring, foreign transfers, and the one person sitting calmly at the table. "Me. You're not just some compliance employee," he said. "No." The room went quiet again. Vanessa looked between us. "Julian," she said. "What is she talking about?" Julian rubbed his forehead. For the first time since he arrived, he looked tired. Then he did something I almost expected. He turned toward Vanessa. "This is your fault," he said. Vanessa blinked. "What? You're the one who pushed this," he said. Her voice rose instantly. "Excuse me, you wanted the lifestyle," Julian snapped. "The clothes, the parties, the image." Vanessa stared at him like she had just been slapped. "You're blaming me. You're the one who said my salary wasn't enough," Julian said. "You said everyone at those contractor events drove better cars." Vanessa's mouth opened in disbelief. "You're the one who started taking those trips," she said. "I took those trips because you wanted more money. You're the one who said the system was easy to work around." Julian's voice got louder. "I said it was manageable. I didn't say you should start spending like a movie star." Vanessa held up the Hermes bag. "You bought this, I bought one," he snapped. "You bought the rest." They were both talking faster now. Years of quiet resentment suddenly pouring out in the middle of my living room. "You told me it was safe," Vanessa said. "It was safe until you started flashing the money everywhere," Julian replied. "You're the one who wanted the big house. You wanted the designer closet." Vanessa laughed bitterly. "So now I'm the criminal." Julian didn't hesitate. "You're the one laundering the money." Vanessa froze. That word landed hard. Even Julian seemed to realize what he had just said. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Vanessa whispered something. "You coward." Julian didn't respond. I watched both of them quietly, two people who had spent years building a life around appearances. Now the structure was cracking, and underneath it was nothing but panic. Vanessa looked at me suddenly. "Say something," she demanded. I shrugged slightly. "You two seem busy." Her voice turned sharp again. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said calmly. "I'm observing it." Julian ran a hand through his hair. "What do you want?" he asked. "Nothing. That's not true." "You showed up here," I said. "Not the other way around." Julian looked at the papers again. "You can fix this," he said quietly. I didn't answer. "You clearly have some kind of authority," he continued. Vanessa looked at him. "What authority?" Julian ignored her. "You can call whoever flagged those accounts," he said. "Tell them there's been a misunderstanding." "And why would I do that?" "Because we're family." I almost smiled. That word always shows up right when people run out of leverage. Before I could respond, the apartment door slammed open, hard. My father walked in like he was entering a military briefing room. Richard Carter, retired Army colonel, still standing straight like he was 25. He looked around the room quickly. Julian, Vanessa, me. Then his eyes landed on the documents on the table. "What is going on here?" he demanded. Vanessa rushed toward him. "Dad, Audrey is trying to destroy us." My father looked at me. His expression was pure anger. "I knew you were upset after Christmas," he said, "but this is completely unacceptable." I stayed seated. Julian spoke up quickly. "Sir, there's been some confusion with my clearance status." "I'm aware," my father said. He turned back toward me. "You're going to fix this immediately." I raised an eyebrow. "Fix what?" "These ridiculous accusations," he snapped. Vanessa nodded behind him. "Yes." My father pointed at the documents. "Delete whatever nonsense you've been collecting." I leaned back in my chair. "You think I control federal investigations?" "I think you're abusing your position," he said. "Dad," I said calmly, "you don't even know my position." His voice rose. "I know enough to see you're trying to ruin this family." Vanessa added quickly. "She froze our accounts." Julian stayed quiet now. He knew better. My father stepped closer to the table. "Audrey," he said sharply, "erase those files right now." The room was silent again. I slowly stood up. Vanessa looked relieved for a second. My father crossed his arms like he expected obedience. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my badge. Black card, gold seal. Department of Defense. My father's eyes narrowed. "What is that supposed to mean?" I held the badge up where everyone could see it. "Your reputation is already finished, Colonel," I said evenly. He froze. The title hit him like a brick. Nobody had called him that in years. Unless they were making a point. Then I added one more sentence. "Unless you'd like to go to prison with your son-in-law." I watched the rain slide down the window of the government sedan as we crossed the bridge into Washington. The city always looks different at night. The monuments are lit, the streets are quiet, and most of the real work happens in buildings without signs on the door. Tonight's event was not one of those buildings. Tonight was a gala. Officially, it was called the Defense Contractors Appreciation Dinner. It was one of those events where companies that make weapon systems and technology gather in expensive suits to congratulate each other. Lots of champagne, lots of handshakes, lots of people pretending everything in the defense industry runs on patriotism instead of money. The ballroom was inside a hotel near Capitol Hill. Large chandeliers, white tablecloths, security at every entrance. Normally, I wouldn't attend something like this, but tonight the guest list mattered. Julian had one last card left to play, and I needed him to play it. The car stopped near the entrance. I stepped out and handed my credentials to the security officer at the door. He checked the list, nodded, and let me through. Inside the room was already full. Contractors, generals, lobbyists, people who spoke in quiet voices and made decisions that affected billions of dollars. I walked through the crowd slowly. Across the room, I saw them, Vanessa and Julian. They had arrived early. Vanessa was wearing a black evening gown that looked like it came straight out of a fashion magazine. The dress probably cost more than my entire monthly rent. I recognized it immediately. One of the last purchases that had cleared before the financial monitoring system froze their accounts. $10,000, paid on the final credit card that hadn't been locked yet. Vanessa held a champagne glass like she was born in that ballroom. Julian stood beside her, trying very hard to look relaxed. From a distance, they looked like the same confident couple from Christmas dinner. Up close, it was different. Julian's smile was tight. Vanessa's eyes kept scanning the room. They were waiting for someone. Then Julian saw him. Across the ballroom, a tall man in a dark uniform entered with 2 aides behind him. 3 stars on the shoulder, Lieutenant General Marcus Hale. He had spent 30 years in the Army and currently oversaw several large procurement programs. More importantly for Julian, Hale had publicly praised Julian's company during a defense conference 6 months earlier. Julian believed Hale was his protector, his last safety net. Vanessa leaned closer to her husband. "That's him," she whispered. Julian nodded. "Stay calm," he said. "We just need 5 minutes with him." They started moving through the crowd. I watched from the far side of the room. Julian adjusted his jacket. Vanessa lifted her chin. They were still acting like this was just another networking event. Like nothing had happened. Like his clearance wasn't suspended. Like their finances weren't under investigation. Julian believed Hale could fix everything with a phone call. What he didn't know was that Hale had already spoken to me 2 hours earlier. The general was standing near the stage when Vanessa spotted me. She stopped walking immediately. Her eyes narrowed. Then she laughed loudly. Not because anything was funny, because she wanted people around us to hear. "Oh my God," she said dramatically. Julian turned to see what she was looking at. Then he saw me. Vanessa raised her voice just enough to attract attention from the nearby guests. "Who invited the office paperwork staff?" she said. Several people turned their heads. Vanessa smiled like she had just delivered the perfect joke. "I didn't realize administrative employees were allowed at contractor galas." Julian didn't laugh. He was watching my face carefully. He already understood something Vanessa didn't. I didn't answer her. I simply stood there and waited. Across the room, General Hale noticed the movement. He began walking toward us. Vanessa's confidence returned immediately. She straightened her posture. "Perfect timing," she whispered to Julian. Julian nodded. When Hale reached them, Vanessa smiled brightly. "General Hale," she said, extending her hand. The general did not take it. He walked past her, straight toward me. Vanessa's hand stayed hanging in the air. The room grew quieter around us. The general stopped 2 feet in front of me. Then he did something Vanessa clearly did not expect. He stood up straight and saluted. Several conversations nearby stopped immediately. A 3-star general does not salute people casually. His voice was clear and professional. "Director," he said. I returned the nod. "General," Vanessa looked between us like her brain had stopped working. Julian's face had gone pale. General Hale continued speaking. "The operational teams are in position," he said, "awaiting your authorization." I answered calmly. "Understood." Vanessa whispered something. What does that mean?" No one responded to her. The general stepped slightly aside. Across the ballroom, several men in dark suits had quietly entered the room. Most guests didn't notice them. But I did, and Julian definitely did. Vanessa still hadn't processed what was happening. She forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous," she said. "What kind of game is this?" Then she looked back at me. "You're seriously pretending to be important at a contractor event." Before I could answer, the general spoke again. "Director, the teams are ready. Vanessa's champagne glass slipped slightly in her hand. Director, she repeated. Her eyes slowly moved back to me. For the first time since Christmas dinner, she looked uncertain. Julian's voice was barely audible. Vanessa. But she ignored him. She stared directly at me. What director? She asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I simply said the truth. The kind that doesn't work in HR. Vanessa's hand lost its grip. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble floor and shattered. The sound of Vanessa's champagne glass breaking on the marble floor echoed farther than anyone expected. For a moment, the entire ballroom went quiet. Not silent, just that strange pause when a room full of powerful people suddenly realizes something serious is about to happen. General Hale stepped slightly to the side. That movement was the signal. Within seconds, the ballroom doors opened again. Men in dark suits entered. They didn't rush. They didn't raise their voices. They simply walked into the room with the calm confidence of people who already controlled the situation. Federal agents, some from Defense Criminal Investigative Service, some from Treasury, 2 from the FBI. Most guests didn't recognize the badges immediately, but they understood the body language. Something official was happening. Julian understood it first. His face went completely pale. Vanessa was still staring at me like she hadn't processed anything since the word director. Julian grabbed her arm. We need to leave, he whispered. Too late. 2 agents quietly positioned themselves behind him. Another stepped beside Vanessa. General Hale addressed the room calmly. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain where you are. This is a federal investigation. The room filled with murmurs. People stepped back from Julian and Vanessa like they were suddenly radioactive. Julian looked at the agents. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. No one responded. He looked at me instead. Audrey, he said. Not Audrey Carter, not Miss Carter. Just my name. Like we were back at the Christmas dinner table. I walked toward him slowly. My heels echoed against the ballroom floor. Camera flashes were already starting from the far side of the room. Someone had tipped off a few journalists covering the gala. This moment was never meant to stay private. Julian swallowed. You don't need to do this, he said quietly. I stopped a few feet away from him. Behind me, the agents waited. Vanessa finally found her voice again. This is harassment, she said loudly. You can't just walk into a private event and... An agent calmly held up a badge. Federal authority, ma'am. Vanessa stopped talking. Julian looked like someone trying to stay calm while standing in rising water. You made your point, he said to me. My point, yes, he said quickly. You embarrassed us. Congratulations. I didn't respond. Julian lowered his voice further. You don't need to destroy everything. Destroy. Interesting word. One of the agents stepped closer. Mr. Julian Brooks, he said clearly. Please place your hands where we can see them. Julian ignored him. His eyes were still locked on mine. We can work this out, he said. I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. You know my career is over if this goes public. I said nothing. Audrey. He continued. We're family, that word again. Family always shows up right when people run out of excuses. Vanessa stepped forward suddenly. This is your fault, she said to me. You're doing this because of that stupid text message. Several people nearby heard that. Camera flashes intensified. Vanessa realized it too late. Julian looked at her in disbelief. Stop talking, he whispered, but the damage was done. The lead agent spoke again. Mr. Brooks, place your hands behind your back. Julian looked around the room. Hundreds of eyes were watching him. Contractors, officers, lobbyists, people who had shaken his hand just hours earlier. He looked back at me. Then something unexpected happened. His knees gave out. Julian dropped to the floor, right there in the middle of the ballroom. He grabbed the edge of my coat like someone drowning. Please, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. You don't have to do this. The entire room was silent now. I reached into my coat pocket. Julian watched my hand like it might contain his last chance. Instead of helping him up, I pulled out a folded document. Official paper, government seal, red classification stamp across the top. I opened it slowly. Camera flashes filled the room. I read from the document in a clear voice. Julian Brooks. His name echoed through the ballroom. Effective immediately, your security clearance is permanently revoked under federal authority due to violations involving classified program integrity and undisclosed foreign financial activity. Julian closed his eyes. The agent gently pulled his hands behind his back. Cold metal cuffs clicked into place. The sound was sharp, final. Then I looked at Vanessa. She was frozen in place, still clutching the Hermes bag like it was a shield. "Vanessa Carter," I said calmly. Her eyes widened. "You sent a message to a federal officer on Christmas Eve instructing her to leave a family property and threatening her employment." Her mouth opened. I continued before she could speak. "That message has been preserved as evidence in an ongoing federal investigation." Vanessa looked around the room. Reporters, phones recording, camera flashes everywhere. Her perfect public image was dissolving in real time. "You can't use a text message like that," she said weakly. I held up my phone. "Yes," I said. "I can." The agents guided Julian toward the exit. He didn't fight anymore. Vanessa stood alone in the center of the ballroom. For the first time in her life, there was no audience applauding her. Only witnesses, and the quiet sound of a family empire collapsing. 3 weeks after the gala, the headlines stopped. Washington moves on quickly. One week, everyone is talking about a scandal. The next week, there is a new one. But the consequences don't move on so easily. Julian was no longer wearing Armani suits. He was sitting in a federal detention facility in Virginia, waiting for trial. The charges were not small. Unauthorized disclosure of restricted defense information. Financial crimes connected to foreign transfers. Lying on a federal security form. Each one of those charges can end a career. Together, they end a life. The $400 million contract he bragged about at Christmas dinner had already been reassigned to another company. His name had been removed from every program list. In Washington, once your clearance disappears permanently, so does your future. Vanessa's fall was quieter, but just as complete. The Treasury investigation had frozen every account connected to her consulting company. The shell structure collapsed almost immediately once investigators started pulling the records. Luxury stores stopped calling her a preferred client. Credit cards stopped working. Within 2 weeks, the apartment she shared with Julian was gone. She moved back into my parents' house, more specifically the basement. My father had spent years telling everyone that house was a symbol of his successful military career. Now it was something else, a financial liability. The investment loans he and my mother took out for Julian's business expansion were connected to the same accounts under investigation. Banks do not like uncertainty. They like repayment. The foreclosure notice arrived 10 days after the gala. I learned about it the same way I learned about most things in Washington, through paperwork. On a gray Thursday morning, I finished a meeting at the Pentagon and walked back toward the secured parking area, where the government vehicles wait. The air was cold and damp. Winter in Washington is never dramatic. It's just a steady mix of rain and wind that seeps through your coat. As I stepped outside the building, I saw them, 3 figures standing near the security barrier, my mother, my father, and Vanessa. They looked smaller than I remembered. My father's posture had changed. He no longer stood like an army colonel giving orders. His shoulders were slightly bent like someone carrying something heavy. My mother's eyes were red. Vanessa wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore, just a simple coat and jeans. When they saw me, all 3 of them started walking toward the gate. The security officer looked at me. "Do you want them allowed through, ma'am?" I shook my head. "No," so we spoke across the barrier. My mother spoke first. "Audrey," she said. Her voice broke immediately. "We've been trying to reach you." "I know." She gripped the metal railing. "Please," she said, "we need your help." Vanessa stepped forward quickly. "This has gone too far," she said. I looked at her. "This is exactly as far as it needed to go." Her voice rose. "You destroyed everything." "No," I said. "Julian did." Vanessa shook her head. "You could fix this," she said. "You know people." There it was again. The assumption that power exists to protect family. My father finally spoke. "Audrey." His voice was lower than I had ever heard it. "The bank is taking the house." I said nothing. "We thought the investment was safe," he continued. "Julian convinced us." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You're the one who started all of this." I ignored her. My mother's voice came out as a whisper. "We're family," she said. That word again. Family, the same word that had been absent at the Christmas dinner table. The same word that appeared now that everything had collapsed. "You could talk to someone," my mother said. "Maybe the prosecutors, maybe the bank," my father added quietly. "Just help us stabilize things." Vanessa looked at me with something close to desperation. "Blood should matter," she said. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The rain started falling again, light but steady. Then I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out a folded sheet of paper. My mother looked confused. "What is that?" I walked closer to the barrier and placed the paper in her hands. She unfolded it slowly. Her eyes moved across the page. The printed text message was only one sentence long. "You're the embarrassment of this family. Finish eating and leave. I don't have a useless sister anymore." Vanessa recognized it immediately. Her face went pale. My mother's hands started shaking. I spoke calmly. "Family is not something you throw away with a text message," I said. The rain hit the pavement around us. "And it's not something you pick back up when you need money." No one answered. Vanessa stared at the ground. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but the words never came. A black government vehicle pulled up behind me. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. I took one last look at them. 3 people who once believed I was the least important person in the room. Then I turned around. I got into the car. The door closed with a heavy sound. Through the window, I could still see them standing there, in the cold Washington rain. If you've ever had family treat you like you don't matter until they need something from you, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think people like that deserve another chance, or is walking away the only real boundary? Tell me what you think in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice, consequences, and knowing your worth. When everything finally went quiet, I started noticing how different silence feels after chaos. For weeks, my phone had been full of calls, reporters asking questions, lawyers confirming timelines, internal meetings about the investigation, paperwork that seemed to multiply every time I cleared my desk. Then one morning it stopped. No messages, no alerts, just a normal workday. That was the moment I realized something important. What happened to my family didn't begin with a crime. It began long before that. It began with a family that slowly stopped respecting boundaries. People like to believe disasters start with one dramatic decision, a betrayal, a crime, a moment where someone crosses the line. But real life doesn't work that way. Most disasters grow quietly over time. They grow in small moments that nobody questions. A joke that crosses the line but nobody responds to. A lie that gets ignored because it's convenient. A success story nobody examines too closely. In my family, the pattern was simple. Vanessa was the golden child. Julian was the impressive husband. And I was the quiet one who worked in government paperwork. At least that's how they described it. What they didn't understand was that respect inside a family matters more than status. Because when respect disappears, judgment usually disappears with it. My parents loved Vanessa. I don't doubt that. But somewhere along the way, love turned into something else. Protection, blind protection. The kind where nobody asked questions because the answers might be uncomfortable. When Julian started talking about massive contracts, nobody asked how a relatively new contractor suddenly had access to that level of information. When Vanessa began spending money that clearly exceeded their reported income, nobody wondered where it came from. And when I raised small concerns at the dinner table, they didn't ask why. They laughed. That's the first lesson I learned. Family loyalty without accountability is dangerous. Loving someone doesn't mean protecting every decision they make. Sometimes loving someone means asking the uncomfortable question before the consequences become permanent. But that only works when a family respects honesty more than appearances. My family respected appearances. A big house, an expensive car, a husband with government contracts. Those things looked impressive from the outside. But appearances are fragile. They fall apart the moment someone looks closely. And when they did, everything collapsed at once. That leads to the second lesson. Respect is the real currency inside a family. Not money, not success. Respect. The text message Vanessa sent me on Christmas Eve wasn't just an insult. It was a statement about how she saw me. Disposable, unimportant, someone who could be removed from the table without consequences. The truth is, families don't collapse because of one argument. They collapse when disrespect becomes normal. When one person is allowed to belittle another and everyone else just watches. When silence replaces fairness. When the quiet person in the room becomes the easiest target. For years, I stayed quiet. Not because I was weak. Because I believed keeping the peace was the responsible choice. But peace built on silence doesn't last. Eventually, something breaks. In my case, it happened over a dinner table and a careless laptop connection. Which brings me to the third lesson. Boundaries are not betrayal. A A lot of people believe that refusing to help family is a form of disloyalty. They believe blood means unconditional support. But unconditional support without boundaries isn't loyalty, it's surrender. If I had ignored what I saw that night, Julian would have continued selling restricted information. Vanessa would have continued moving the money. My parents would have invested even more into a business built on fraud. And eventually, the consequences would have reached all of us: my career, my freedom, my future. Sometimes the most responsible decision is the one that disappoints the people closest to you. Not because you want revenge, but because the truth matters more than comfort. The fourth lesson is something I wish more people understood earlier in life. Silence is often the smartest response. At the Christmas dinner table, Vanessa expected a fight. She expected tears, arguments, drama. Instead, I stood up and left, not because I was defeated, because I had already seen something far more important than the insult. Julian's laptop connected to a home network. That single detail told me everything I needed to know. Sometimes the loudest person in the room believes they're winning, but the quiet person paying attention usually has the advantage. Anger makes people careless. Arrogance makes them sloppy. And when someone is both angry and arrogant, they often expose their own weaknesses. That night, I didn't need to argue. I just needed to observe. That's the final lesson I want to share. Consequences are not revenge. People like to frame stories like this as payback. But nothing I did was revenge. I didn't invent evidence. I didn't manipulate the system. I simply allowed the system to see what was already happening. Julian violated security laws. Vanessa moved illegal money. And when the evidence appeared, the law responded exactly the way it was designed to. What destroyed their lives wasn't my decision. It was their behavior. Accountability can feel cruel to the people facing it. But accountability is what keeps everything else functioning. Without it, power becomes corruption, success becomes fraud, and families become something far more dangerous than strangers. When I think back to that Christmas dinner now, I don't remember the insult. I remember the moment I saw the laptop connect to the network. Because that moment revealed something important. The person everyone underestimated at the table was the only one paying attention. And sometimes that's the only advantage you need. After everything happened, something unexpected started showing up in my inbox: messages. A lot of them. Some were short, just a few sentences from people who had seen the news coverage about the investigation. Others were long emails from people telling me about their own families, different cities, different careers, different situations. But the stories all had something in common. Someone felt underestimated. Someone felt ignored. Someone felt like the quiet person in the room that nobody really respected. One message stuck with me. A woman wrote that her family always treated her like the boring sister because she worked in accounting while her brother started flashy businesses. Another man said his parents always trusted his older siblings' promises about investments, even when the numbers never made sense. And one message simply said, I think a lot of us have been the Audrey at that table. If that sounds familiar to you, then I want to share a few things. I wish someone had told me earlier in life. Not about revenge, not about winning, about protecting your life before things get out of control. The first thing I wish more people understood is this: pay attention to patterns, not apologies. Anyone can apologize after a mistake. People say sorry all the time, but apologies are cheap if the behavior never changes. When I look back at my family now, I realize there were patterns that existed long before the Christmas dinner. Vanessa always dismissed people she thought were less impressive. Julian always exaggerated his success, and my parents always defended them. Those patterns were there for years, but nobody challenged them. Instead, every warning sign was treated like a misunderstanding, or a personality difference, or a harmless argument. The truth is, people reveal who they are through repetition. If someone lies once, it may be a mistake. If they lie 10 times, it's a pattern, and patterns matter more than promises. The second piece of advice is something many families avoid discussing. Financial boundaries protect relationships. Money has a strange way of turning emotional loyalty into pressure. Parents ask for help. Siblings ask for investment. Relatives ask you to sign something just to help out. Most people say yes because they don't want to appear selfish. But the fastest way to destroy trust inside a family is mixing money with blind loyalty. My parents believed they were supporting Vanessa and Julian's success. What they were actually doing was tying their financial future to someone else's risk. When that risk collapsed, it didn't just affect Julian. It pulled everyone else down with it. So here's the rule I follow now. Never sign something you don't fully understand. Never invest in something you can't explain. And never allow emotional pressure to replace financial logic. If someone truly cares about you, they will respect those boundaries. The third lesson is about success. Real success survives scrutiny. Fake success collapses the moment someone looks closely. Julian's life looked impressive on the surface. Luxury car, government contracts, high-end parties, but the entire structure was built on information that didn't belong to him. And that kind of success always carries a timer. Eventually, someone asks questions. Eventually, someone checks the numbers. Eventually, the truth shows up. If you build your life on shortcuts, the collapse is only a matter of time. But if you build it on integrity, scrutiny isn't something to fear. It's something you can survive. The fourth thing I want people to understand is this. Your worth is not decided at the family dinner table. Some families have a hierarchy. One child becomes the favorite. One becomes the disappointment. And one becomes the quiet one everyone assumes will always adapt. If you grew up in a situation like that, it can shape the way you see yourself. You start believing the labels people attach to you: responsible, boring, not ambitious, not impressive. But those labels usually say more about the person assigning them than the person receiving them. The truth is, the person who appears quiet is often the one paying attention. The person who seems less flashy is often the one making the careful decisions. And sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the only one in the room who actually understands what's happening. That was the situation at my family's Christmas dinner. Everyone believed Julian was the successful one. Everyone believed Vanessa had married well. And everyone believed I was just the quiet sister with a paperwork job. They didn't realize the quiet sister was the only one in the room who understood what Julian's laptop connection meant. Which leads to the final piece of advice. Walking away from toxic behavior doesn't make you cold, it makes you free. For a long time, I believed maintaining peace inside my family meant tolerating things that made me uncomfortable. Disrespect, dismissive comments, decisions that didn't make sense. I told myself that keeping the peace was the responsible thing to do. But peace without respect isn't peace. It's silence. And silence allows bad behavior to grow unchecked. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you hate someone. It means you refuse to participate in their mistakes. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is step back and allow consequences to happen. Not because you want someone to fail, but because protecting them from the consequences only delays the damage. I don't know what the future holds for my family. Maybe one day they'll understand the decisions that led them here. Maybe they won't, but I do know this. Walking away from that situation didn't make me lose my family. It helped me understand what family should actually mean. So now I want to ask you something. If you were sitting at that Christmas table, and you saw the same warning signs I did, would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace, or would you have done exactly what I did?
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.